Hey everyone, what is going on? It's the one and only, and I'm back this time coming to you with an iPad Mid-2022 buyer's guide. It's about that time. The September event is right around the corner, and also the holiday season is upon us. It's quickly approaching, and I know you guys have a ton of questions. A lot of you guys shoot me DMs all the time asking, hey, which iPad is right for me? And no worries, those questions will all be answered in this video. So across Apple's entire lineup of iPad, you may be wondering which one is the right fit for you. So buckle up, we're not gonna waste much time. We're gonna dive straight into some knowledge. So grab some snacks, grab a drink, and get ready because we're about to roll this intro. So you're in the market for a new iPad, huh? Or maybe you're looking to buy one for a significant other, for a child, or even for a friend. Well, no worries, this is the right video for you. So here they all are. There are technically four iPads currently existing on Apple's lineup, and they come in varying shapes, varying sizes, and colors. So it's really important, especially when dropping so much money on a tablet, that you know what you're getting yourself into. So first, we're gonna start with the cheapest offering, and that's just the iPad, or at least that's what they dub it, just iPad, but really it's the iPad 9th generation. So once again, starting out with the cheapest tablet, this is it. This is the 9th generation iPad, and as you can see, it has a very dated design language. So this iPad is considered the budget iPad, starting out at $329 for the 64 gigabyte variant, and for students, I believe it's right under $300 at $299. However, if you want more storage, the upsell is quite brutal. The only other option you have is a 256 gigabyte option, and that one bumps up the price all the way to $479. But what I will say is that this iPad, the budget iPad, is the iPad for 95% of people, and productivity-wise, probably for about 90% of people. Because let's be honest, most people are using their iPads either to consume content like on Netflix or Hulu, browsing the internet, playing games, or just having it as a secondary screen. Not to mention that this is the best iPad for children. There's a bunch of cases out there that are designed for kids, especially on this 9th generation tablet, because it's a lot more durable, and honestly, not that you want to drop an iPad, but if you were to drop this one, at least you can say you didn't drop a $1,000 iPad Pro 12.9 inch. So the pill's a little bit easier to swallow at that point. But to highlight some of its main features, as you can see, it does feature Touch ID. It doesn't have any of the fancy biometrics like Face ID. You are gonna have some really, and I mean really thick bezels around the screen. I'm telling you, this design is just very aged. It reminds me of the 2010s. Back then, this design was phenomenal. Everyone was in love with it. But after so many years, it's getting very stale and boring. On the back, you're gonna feature a measly 8 megapixel wide camera sensor, which is okay. For an iPad, I don't see many people taking photography seriously on an iPad. For those that do, you know, that's your business. I would prefer to use an iPhone or my Sony camera. It has a 12 megapixel front-facing camera, which does not support center stage. I'll brush up on that a little bit later. And it features the A13 Bionic chip, which is still pretty fast for today's standards and will get most of your tasks done without a sweat. Now, one of my bigger complaints about the budget iPad is that it does feature a Lightning port and not USB-C. I really wish Apple would begin to streamline their entire product line so that every single iPad had USB-C, but still here on the iPad 9th generation, we're still stuck with a Lightning connector. You'll also notice on the sides is the smart connector, and sadly, this iPad is not compatible with Apple's much more advanced Magic Keyboard. It is compatible with their smart keyboard, but honestly, I've reviewed that as well. Click the card at the top right. I don't really like the typing experience on this keyboard. The material is kind of this cloth / mesh-like kind of feel to it. I don't know, I really don't enjoy it just because you don't get that tactile feedback of a traditional keyboard. But with that being said, at $329, $299 for students, you really can't go wrong with this. It also supports Apple Pencil 1 support and not Apple Pencil 2, so it still charges in that idiotic unicorn charging method that just looks silly. I mean, it's just prone to being knocked over, or I don't know, who knows, maybe worse, just being snapped right off from the connector. At least that's my fear most of the time. So it's not like this Apple Pencil can just snap to the side of the iPad. You have to charge it in that silly method. So in comparison, I do have the Apple Pencil 2, which the rest of the iPad lineup does support, which speaking of, now let's head over and dissect the iPad mini. Rumors that this entire product was gonna be scrapped after the 5th generation, but so many people love it, myself included, for many, many reasons. First of all, just look at it. It is extremely palmable. So you could even put this in your back pocket if your pockets are large enough, mostly for guys. Now I wouldn't recommend sitting down while having this in your pocket for obvious reasons. But look at it, it's great. And best of all, it has Apple Pencil 2 support. And as you can see, the volume buttons had to be relocated to the top to make room for the Apple Pencil 2. It's that small. It features an 8.3 liquid retina display and it looks pretty nice. Inside, powering this thing is the A15 Bionic chip, so it's gonna be 2 years ahead of the budget iPad in terms of chipset. And what a difference that makes, especially while gaming. So one of my favorite things to do on the iPad mini is play games. I don't mobile game as religiously as I used to, but the cool thing is, since it's so palmable, it almost feels like a PlayStation 5 controller or something. Your thumbs can reach most of the screen real estate in comparison to something like the 12.9 inch. I mean, that thing is just gargantuan. My complaint with the budget iPad has been fixed here since this does feature USB-C, so that's gonna allow for better transfer speeds as well as just universal charging across other devices like MacBooks or something. On the back, we do feature a 12 megapixel camera, so improved from the 8 megapixel sensor on the budget iPad. Now, where this does kind of fall flat, unfortunately, is with the price point. The baseline model is 64 gigabytes and will set you back $500. And once again, Apple are the masters of the upsell because your only other option is the 256 gigabyte option, and that's gonna run you $649. And that doesn't even include the price of cellular. Now, for me, honestly though, I think cellular on an iPad is a little bit silly because let's be realistic. Where now in 2022 can you not find a mobile hotspot or Wi-Fi? But that's besides the point. So my only small, very nitpick complaint about the iPad mini is because of its size, there's not really an official Apple keyboard that you can use. On Apple's website, they will say that it is compatible with Bluetooth keyboards, so you may have to look at third-party alternatives. However, when you have that small of a device, I don't think I would want to feel extremely cramped with my hands anyway while typing. So just know that this is not the best device to type with. Especially the software keyboard. I'm not a fan at all of any software keyboard just because you're not getting that tactile feedback while you're typing, which I thoroughly enjoy. However, thanks to the Apple Pencil 2, this makes a perfect lightweight device to take to school and take notes, maybe a lecture class, who knows, maybe even a business meeting. You just pop it out real quick, go to the Notes app or whatever your preferred note application is, and you're ready to take notes. So I thoroughly enjoy the iPad mini 6. I think it's really versatile. I really enjoy it for gaming. As far as content consumption though, it is a smaller screen, but it is a very nice and vivid liquid retina display. So colors do pop out, not as much as on the beefier 12.9 inch iPads. Those have superior displays. And so now moving on to the iPad Air 5th generation. I like to call this the older brother of the iPad mini because in many ways, they're extremely similar. As you can see, they both have Apple Pencil 2 support. It features that same design language of the display with no home button. And rather, I forgot to mention both the iPad mini and the iPad Air feature biometric authentication in the form of Touch ID. It's going to be embedded in the button over there at the top right corner. Now, the starting prices are very interesting because $100 more than the iPad mini and you can snag yourself an iPad Air. The base model, 64 gigabytes, starts at $599. Once again, your only other option is to opt for the 256 gigabyte model, and that will set you back $750. It's almost to the price point of an iPad Pro. And many of my personal friends and colleagues have asked me the ultimate question before: iPad Air or iPad Pro 11-inch? And honestly, I think the iPad Air is the most versatile of the iPads, period. So it features this nice and massive 10.9-inch liquid retina display that is extremely immersive, especially when consuming content. The cameras will be unchanged from the iPad mini, so the back lens is a 12 megapixel wide camera lens, as well as the front camera is also going to be the same standard 12 megapixel front facing camera. And I've said this before in a ton of my videos, I absolutely love center stage. Center stage is that feature where your face is being followed wherever you are on the display. It has a decent angle of articulation so that if you're on FaceTime or whatever, and if you have your iPad propped up and you happen to move out of frame, the camera will follow you and keep you within frame, which I think is very cool. Once again, we have Apple Pencil 2 support, but the biggest thing and the biggest change about the iPad Air 5th Gen, aside from the removal of the perfect green color, I don't know why they did that, that was the best color iPad ever, is the implementation of the M1 chip in here. And this is where a lot of people were scratching their heads, because at this point in August 2022, it makes little sense to go for the iPad Pro 11-inch, and I'll touch on that in just a second. My main reason for that is because the iPad Air and iPad Pro 11-inch have the same chipset. It is the M1. The M1 is Apple's own proprietary chip that they first unveiled on a few of the MacBooks about a year or two ago. And man, is it overkill for the iPads. Looking at performance alone, the iPad Air has never showed me any sluggishness whatsoever. Games play extremely crisp with almost no drop frames whatsoever. Some people will say that this is complete overkill, and honestly, I might agree. You know, I feel like there's a lot of lost potential with iPad OS, but this isn't the video for that. What we're going over is knowing who this iPad is for, and like I said, it's the most versatile. And again, because this has the same chipset at this moment in time as the iPad Pro 11-inch, I mean, this makes it a great candidate for anyone looking for a reliable iPad that's gonna last you many, and I mean many years to come. Not to mention that the speakers here are a little bit better, so it's not that quad speaker system that's found on the iPad Pro models, but you still have this two-way landscape stereo speaker that's really nice, like I said, especially when watching Netflix. I can wholeheartedly recommend the iPad Air for a ton of students, a lot of professionals if you're using iPads for iMovie and stuff like that, because of the raw power that's packed inside with the M1 chip. If you can swallow the $600 price tag, I think this is a way better step above from the budget iPad. And really, it all comes down to preference. The iPad mini and the iPad Air are very similar in a ton of ways. It just depends on the screen real estate and how much screen you want in your life. All right, so now we're moving on to the 11-inch iPad Pro. This is the enigma for most people, especially those people who aren't as well versed in technology as much as someone like me. But that's what you guys have me here for. So this might be the longest section because I do have a lot to say about this and the iPad Air. First of all, let's start with pricing and how Apple and their marketing team are just ingenious. So the base model starts at $799, and I mentioned beforehand how the price point of the 256GB iPad Air is almost to this price point. The good thing is Apple does hook us up here, if you really want to call it that, on a Pro tablet with a starting storage of 128GB, and that again starts at $799. Then you have up to a 256GB option, 512, 1TB, and up to a whopping 2TB. Now you do really have to have some really deep pockets to go for the 2TB version, as that is going to set you back, hold on, there has to be a pause there, $1,899. And it comes in your choice of only two colors. For the Pro models, we don't get that much variety. It's only silver and space gray. Now, let's go over some similarities across the iPad Air and the iPad Pro 11-inch. So the design language, the body language is very similar. They're roughly the same size. You do get a bigger display, technically, on the 11-inch iPad Pro, and that's due to slimmer bezels. The iPad Air 5th Gen has a 10.9-inch display. This has a solid 11-inch display. So if those fractions of inches mean anything to you, then that's your prerogative. Also, what I forgot to mention about the iPad Air, the Magic Keyboard is now supported on the Air, and it has been supported for the 11-inch iPad Pro for quite a while. And the Magic Keyboard is just like any scissor-style keyboard that you may or may not have experienced on a typical MacBook. So it's a really nice tactile keyboard. It feels really nice, and it even has a mouse and a floating hinge design. Another similarity, once again at this point, the 11-inch Pro features the M1 chip, and it was the first iPad alongside the 12.9-inch to feature the M1 iPad. The iPad Air 5th Gen is the new kid on the block, so it did receive the M1 chip only recently. Now, the iPad Pro 11-inch is due for a refresh probably this October. This is why at this moment, I would wait. If you're looking to buy an iPad right now, I would wait, just because this has the same chipset as the much cheaper iPad Air. And really, much isn't the best word there, isn't it? You're still dishing out a ton of money. But there are some subtle differences between the two iPads, and let me explain those to you. First, of course, is the difference in the base storage. So on the iPad Air, it is 64 gigabytes. If you want to shell out a little more though, the iPad Pro 11-inch starts at 128 gigs, so it's double the storage. Now, of course, you do have to pay up just a little bit of a premium for that. On the back, we are going to have a square design for our camera cutout, and here, as you can see, we have two cameras plus a LiDAR scanner for AR photography or just for augmented reality in general. One is going to be a 12 megapixel wide sensor and the other is a 10 megapixel ultra wide sensor. So in terms of photography, this is going to be the better option. But once again, I don't see or know many people personally who like to use iPads for photography, but it is there, and it is one of those more pro-er features, if you will. The USB-C connector might appear the same at first glance, but it does support Thunderbolt 4, so it is going to include much faster transfer speeds for those photographers who may need quick access to importing and exporting photos on the fly. So there is also that. Once again, you do have the enormous quad speaker design, which sounds really, really excellent. It's really hard to portray that over a YouTube video, but if you have an Apple store nearby, it's night and day. The speaker quality between this and the Air is just really apparent. And when consuming movies, for example, whenever I watch Netflix with my girlfriend, and if we have to use an iPad for that, then I would much prefer the Pro iPads because of the quad speaker design. So there's also that. But in essence, this is the best iPad for professionals, as the moniker dubs it. This is the Pro after all. But realistically, unless you don't care about any of the extra added Pro features like the better cameras, the slightly bigger screen real estate, the faster USB-C port, the quad speakers, all of that kind of stuff, then you should just go with the iPad Air. However, one of the features that will really make you want to stick around for the iPad Pro 11-inch is ProMotion. So the refresh rate on this is up to 120 Hertz. And it's really hard, once again, to describe this on camera, but I'm going to try to slow down some side-by-side comparisons of the iPad Air and scrolling on the iPad Pro 11-inch, and you can see just how much quicker and more responsive and just more fluid the screen appears. Not to mention that the Pro also can go up to 600 nits of brightness. The iPad Air 5th Gen can only go up to 500 nits. So if you use your iPad a lot outdoors, those extra 100 nits might not sound like a lot, but it will be a lifesaver in those events where you have a really bad sunlight glare, or maybe you just can't get enough brightness to go all the way up. So now moving on to the 12.9-inch, the story is very similar with the iPad Pro 11-inch, but there are some subtle differences that I want to highlight. All right, here it is, the oh Lord, she coming iPad. I mean, just look at it. This is definitely not palmable whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I feel like a server would have some use with this iPad to carry on some food on top of that. But it is a beautiful 12.9-inch liquid retina XDR display. It features True Tone and ProMotion just like the 11-inch iPad Pro. But first, let's go over pricing, because this one is gonna be a tough pill to swallow, trust me. The starting price on the 128 gigabyte version, and once again, especially when you're dishing out this much money on a Pro device, I think that's very lackluster by Apple. I think at a minimum, with the next iteration of the iPad Pros, they have to have a baseline storage of 256 gigabytes. I think when you're dropping more than $1,000 on a Pro device, 128 gigs just does not cut it. But the 128 gigabyte baseline model with no cellular connectivity is gonna set you back $1,099. And once again, you can configure it all the way up to 2 terabytes for a whopping $2,199. If you truly need that much storage, you might as well just opt for a MacBook in that case, because this does tread in that territory of iPad or MacBook. But we're focusing on iPads for today, and maybe in a future video we can compare iPad Pros versus baseline MacBooks. Who knows? If you guys want that, drop a comment down below. So much is the same on the iPad 11-inch and the 12.9-inch. I mean, you get all those really nice features, the ProMotion 120 Hz display, the same camera setup, the same quad speaker system, but there is a distinct advantage to the 12.9-inch, and that is that Liquid Retina XDR display. This is the same display technology that is on Apple's very expensive XDR display, which I do have, and I thoroughly enjoy it. What that means is that it is extreme dynamic range. So everything is just gonna pop out a lot more, especially on HDR content. And as you can see from this side-by-side comparison between the 11-inch and the 12.9-inch, the XDR display is just gonna make blacks just a lot more richer, a lot fuller, and almost completely look black because there's no lighting behind it. There's no backlight like on your traditional LCD displays. This is an XDR display, which means that this isn't OLED per se where you have individual pixels being lit up, but this is a technology that's right in the middle. Everything just looks so vivid, everything bounces so much, and it's just so nice to see a display that's so crisp and lively. Not to mention that when consuming HDR content, this iPad will have a sustained brightness of up to 1000 nits and has a maximum peak brightness of 1600 when consuming HDR content. Otherwise, it's the same as the iPad Pro 11-inch at 600 nits. So the mini LED technology just does wonders, and it's night and day when you're comparing it to something like the budget iPad, which doesn't even have a laminated display. That is one of the drawbacks to the budget iPad. So if you're willing to shell out all this money for that XDR display, I think it is very, very worth it, especially if you're considering an 11-inch or 12.9-inch. You get all that extra screen real estate, which is awesome when pairing it up with the Apple Pencil 2. And of course, it also has support for the Magic Keyboard, and having a larger keyboard with more space to more comfortably type is just awesome. This was my go-to back last semester during my math classes, and it was really cool just to switch from the Apple Pencil in case I needed to write out an equation, and then switch really quickly back to the Magic Keyboard. This does have the M1 chip, so I have occasionally edited a few short TikToks using iMovie on my iPad 12.9-inch, which by the way, you guys should follow me over on my socials. I am starting to post a lot more reels with a lot of tips and tricks on iPads, MacBooks, and iPhones and stuff of the sort. So guys, the 12.9-inch is the Mac Daddy for very good reason. It is the ultimate iPad. However, of course, you are gonna have to pay a very, very hefty premium. I really do think the awesomely large display is really nice, but in a lot of scenarios, I've even come to realize that that large display does become a bit of a hindrance. There are times when you much prefer a smaller display that you can palm, like the iPad mini, but if you are a true professional, this is almost in line with some laptop displays, and even better because of that XDR technology. Oh, and one last quick thing before I forget. So the 11-inch iPad Pro and 12.9-inch do feature Face ID. So you're not gonna have Touch ID like on the Air or the Mini, but honestly, I quite prefer Face ID. If any of you guys have any of the most recent iPhones, you'll know what I'm talking about. Face ID is so quick, it's very snappy, it's almost never failed me. So it's nice to have Face ID on an iPad. All right, guys, I know that was a ton of information. You have iPads all the way coming from $329 up to a 2 terabyte iPad Pro 12.9-inch that's gonna set you back more than $2,000. So here's my final verdict. With the budget iPad, the 329 one, the first one we covered, I believe that that is the iPad for most people. Sure, it does have an aged design. It still has the Touch ID sensor at the bottom with that home button, but I think this is great for children. I think it's great for casual users who just want an iPad to watch Netflix and play the occasional games. And at that price point, you really can't beat it. However, if you want a more versatile device, something a little more modern, then the Mini or the Air is gonna be your best go-to. Personally, for me, I actually dig the size of the iPad Mini. The iPad Mini 6th Gen is just nice and palmable. You can do so much with it. It has a nice and beefy A15 chip. And once again, when it comes to battery life, it does tremendously well. I didn't cover battery in this video because I have proper battery drain test, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the video. So make sure to click the link in the description if you want a true battery drain test. The iPad Air, once again, it does have the beefier M1 chip, which is why it's one step ahead of the Mini. But in essence, they're kind of the same device, just with a larger display, and most of the features and design language is similar. You have the Touch ID sensor there at the top right wake and sleep button. You're gonna have similar cameras, center stage on the front camera, liquid retina display. I mean, they're pretty similar, USB-C, so there's that. Now, of course, it just depends on what size and what model you want. They're just within $100 of striking difference between the two. So I would say though, for students, the Air is definitely the best way to go because you have all of that extra screen real estate. And when it comes to Apple Pencil support, it's just really, really nice to have. Then we go to the Pro models. And once again, I would advise some caution on the Pro models, more so the 11-inch Pro, just because it is so similar to the Air in terms of the chipset found inside. It just has a little bit extra added features that may entice some. But once again, you have the extra storage base option, quad speakers, slightly larger display. True Tone and Pro Motion is the big one, the 120 Hertz refresh rate. So if any of those things matter to you, then definitely hit up the 11-inch Pro, although I would advise just to wait a couple of months. It's most likely gonna get updated with, who knows, the M2 chip. But the 12.9-inch is in its league of its own, just because it has everything that the 11-inch already encompasses, only that it has that truly gorgeous liquid retina XDR display. And trust me, it's something that you just have to see in person, especially when you crank up that brightness all the way up and you're watching and consuming HDR content. Man, everything is so vivid. It's very bright and vibrant. It's just a really great iPad to have. And of course, with it being the largest display, it's great for taking notes. It's great for watching a movie. Overall, it's fantastic and an extremely fun device to have, especially if you pair it up with the Apple Pencil 2 and Magic Keyboard. But then once again, if you want to get the full package with the starting base storage, the Magic Keyboard, and the Apple Pencil 2, well, you're on your way to dropping around 2 racks. So guys, I really hope this video was useful. I have had a ton of experience with the entire iPad lineup. I can't say I'm disappointed in any single iPad. Each one has its own use case. Drop your comments down below. If you learned anything new or like this kind of content, definitely click that red subscribe button down below. There's a ton of future content coming up for you guys. I'm gonna order the MacBook Air with the M2 very, very soon, and I'm gonna cover it in detail, talking about an unboxing, comparison tests, drain test, so be on the lookout in your subscription feed. That's enough for me for now, and I cannot wait to catch you all in the next video.